One organization I have a tremendous amount of respect for is the Pittsburgh Steelers. At the end of the day, when you've won 6 world championships and you've made it to a total of 8 Super Bowls, you've got to be doing something right, which is very strange to say about the Steelers because the first 40 years plus of their existence, they were also Rans. They were a laughingstock. They were a joke organization that just couldn't find out a way to win. But once the 70s hit, Chuck Noll and that steel curtain defense, Terry Bradshaw, and all the talent they had on offense, they won 4 Super Bowl championships, and then they won 2 more in the past decade. So now you sit here and look at an organization, 6 world championships. Again, one of the preeminent, dominant national franchises in all of the NFL. Problem with the organization for the Pittsburgh Steelers now is this is a team to me that, frankly, while they are kind of in a win now mode based off of the fact that Big Ben is not getting any younger, they're a team that's getting old, maybe in the wrong places, and has more holes on both sides of the ball on their roster than people might imagine or think to be true. But I think a lot of Steelers fans would acknowledge the fact that the past couple of years, it hasn't been all that surprising to them that the Steelers haven't produced the results you might expect out of the Pittsburgh Steelers because, frankly, they are a bit of a mediocre football team. They have some talent, but they don't have the talent you might think that comes along with the Steelers name. And now, like I said again, you've got a win now situation, a team looking to win now, but maybe not with the personnel and the players to help them be able to win now. So with this 2014 NFL draft, one of the primary things I thought the Pittsburgh Steelers needed to do was get younger and better, more athletic in certain places on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And some people may argue that they did that. If you look at their draft results down below, in theory, it looks like they got quicker, faster, and more athletic. Looking at their pick of Ryan Shazier with the 15th overall selection, the linebacker from Ohio State. He played outside primarily at Ohio State, but people are looking at him maybe. He played some inside too, but you could also see where the Steelers are envisioning him as an inside linebacker, that super quick, fast inside linebacker in that 3-4 opposite of Lawrence Timmons. Then in round 2, getting that prototype 5 technique 3-4 defensive end in Stephon Tuitt from Notre Dame. Even coming back in round 3 and round 4, getting Dree Archer, that kind of quick twitchish, kind of Dexter McCluster type of guy in a Dree Archer, a Darren Sproles type of guy. A guy could line up in the backfield, he could line up in the slot, he could do a bunch of different things, help you in the return game. Again, increasing and improving the speed on the Steelers roster, getting a guy like Martavis Bryant, the wide receiver from Clemson, a big physical size, speed, athleticism, quickness, freak specimen in round number 4. So this is a draft that in the surface looks very good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In terms of the pick that I like the best for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would say Stephon Tuitt, the second-round guy out of Notre Dame. I think he's a prototype 5 technique defensive end in a 3-4. I like the value for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I like the fit of the player there. I thought this was a good pick and by far, to me, the best pick that they had in the draft. In terms of a guy that might prove out to be the best value is Martavis Bryant, the wide receiver from Clemson. This is a guy people were talking about maybe going in the second round, no lower than early to mid third round, and to be able to get him basically right smack dab in the middle of the 4th round, a guy, again, you're gambling on upside, 6'4", 200 pounds, 4.4 40 speed, explosive quickness and leaping ability. Consistency questions, yes, but from a physical tool standpoint, a guy like a Big Ben has to have his mouth water a little bit at the thought of potentially being able to throw the ball to this big athletic freaking freak. And these type of guys sometimes can pan out to be big-time successes at the NFL level. A guy that could surprise people is a Dree Archer from Kent State. Here's a guy that, like I said to me, fills a Darren Sproles, Dexter McCluster type of role. A guy you can line up some in the backfield, guy you could do some stuff with out of the slot, a guy that can impact you positively on special teams and as a kick returner and as a punt returner. You're going to have to be able to figure out a way to manufacture touches for Dree Archer, but if you could do that, he could bring you an explosive element that the Steelers offense has lacked since Mike Wallace has left the scene. But I have a lot of second guessing ultimately about this Pittsburgh Steelers draft in 2014. Shazier in the 1st round. I don't like the pick for them, and the reason I don't like the pick for them is it is the 3rd first-round pick they have at linebacker. A few years back, it was Lawrence Timmons from Florida State. Then last year it was Jarvis Jones from Georgia. And now again, for the third time in recent years, they have spent a first-round pick on a linebacker in their 3-4 scheme. And it's not an exterior edge rusher. It's a guy that they're envisioning playing inside in Ryan Shazier. I just don't like the concept. I don't like the philosophical approach here. For years, the Steelers have gotten by on linebackers and played very well with linebackers that weren't high draft choices over the years, like the Greg Lloyds and the Levon Kirklands of the world. Yeah, I went that far back. The James Harrisons, the Lamar Woodleys, those guys weren't first-round picks, but they fit the scheme. And I just wonder, that's always been a strength of the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, is the linebackers in their 3-4 system under Dick LeBeau for so many years. Why are they investing so much draft pick currency, if you will, in the first round multiple times to work on this, where you've got one of the great defensive coordinators of all time in Dick LeBeau and one of the great well-run schemes of all time in Pittsburgh's 3-4 defense? Why would you sit there and invest so much into a position that maybe you don't need to? I don't get it. I just don't like the pick that much. That's not to say that Shazier won't work out or Shazier won't be a nice player for the Steelers. I'm not saying that at all. I have more problems with this, again, from a philosophical standpoint. Another thing they really needed was a big physical wide receiver on the outside for Big Ben to work with, and they waited until round 4 to get that. I think they could have sat there, yes, and take Martavis Bryant in round 4. That's perfectly fine. But why not address that position in round number 2 maybe, or even round number 3? Big Ben needs some help on that side of the ball. You lost Emmanuel Sanders. He's lost Mike Wallace. You pretty much got, Antonio Brown? And then what else are you going to go with? Marcus Wheaton? That's a crapshoot at this point, to say the very least. They waited until round 4 to address this position. That seems like a bit of a mistake to me. The biggest mistake of all, though, to me, for the Steelers in this draft was that they waited until the 5th round with Shaquille Richardson, the corner from Arizona, to address their secondary. Let me make this perfectly clear that, in my opinion, the biggest problem with the Steelers in recent years, in particular on the defensive side of the football, is the Steelers' complete and utter distaste and failure to address the secondary early and often in the draft. It has left them in a position where they lack size, they lack explosiveness, and they lack youth. They are just an old secondary that is not all that good, and no signing of Mike Mitchell in free agency does not really fix much of any damn thing at all. Polamalu's getting old. Guys like Taylor and Clark. I mean, how much longer are you going to Gay and all these other guys you've had over the years? How much longer can you get by with these guys? At some point in time, you've got to have some type of shutdown man cover corner on the outside that can legitimately defend against opposing number 1 wide receivers, and the Steelers just don't have that. Their secondary was their biggest problem to me defensively in 2013 and 2012, maybe has been for a few years, and yet the Steelers organization consistently fails to address the position early. And it just blows my ever-loving mind why they feel this way. I just don't get it. To me, the 2 biggest things the Steelers needed in this draft were help on the outside in terms of corners and at wide receiver. And they waited until the 4th round to address wide receiver and the 5th round to address cornerback. And those were 2 classes that were pretty good in this year's draft, both the wide receiver and corner classes. So why wait so long? In terms of the Steelers, like I said, again, it appears, according to a lot of people, to be a really good draft. And on the surface, it seems like it could be. Shazier, Tuitt, Archer, Bryant. Those are 4 pretty solid draft choices. And for a lot of other teams, I might give them a B or a B+ for that, because that's a pretty good draft day haul. But philosophically, this really isn't. I'm not an advocate necessarily of just drafting for need, but I am a favor sometimes of drafting with a certain philosophy in mind, especially if the philosophy matches the board. And when you look at round number 1, you could sit there and say, well, were they really going to take a Dennard at number 15 or a Verrett at number 15? No, maybe they weren't. Maybe they weren't going to take a wide receiver there at maybe 15. But then maybe address another part of the secondary. Both Dix and Pryor are available on the board at 15. They were probably going to have a better long-term impact on your organization than a Shazier would in the inside of that 3-4. He might not even end up being the best inside linebacker they have in their 3-4. That's Lawrence Timmons. So you needed help at safety, a long-term replacement for Polamalu, maybe somebody initially that could even supplant Mike Mitchell and play next to Polamalu, for God's sakes. Find a way to get him involved in nickel and dime situations. Prior, Dix to me should have been the pick for the Steelers all day long at 15. Then a big wide receiver, maybe like an Allen Robinson in round number 2 out of Penn State. Again, to me, I'm just saying philosophically, I didn't like the approach of the Steelers draft because I felt like they waited too long to address areas of big time need. And like I said, I'm not always just a need based draft guy. I am a believer in taking the best player available at a position of need, especially when you're not a playoff team, which the Steelers are not. I just felt that Dix, maybe Pryor, were both a little bit better players, and they were both on the board, and they filled big positions of need. And safety and anything involving the Steelers secondary was still a big need. So waiting to the 4th round to get a wide receiver, 5th round to address corner, again, I just didn't really like the Steelers draft. I like some of the players they took, and some of the players they took will work out fine for them. In particular, I think Stephon Tuitt will. I'm sure Shazier will be fine. If they find a way to manufacture touches for Archer, he'll be fine too. And maybe a Bryant in 2015 or 2016 can establish himself as a nice weapon on the outside for a Big Ben. But this was an average draft to me for the Steelers from a philosophical standpoint, and I've got to give them a C. Sorry, Steeler Nation. You can wave your terrible towels at me in epithet, but that's just the way I see it.